Let's Talk Small Business, the real talk, no BS podcast for business owners and entrepreneurs who want to grow and actually enjoy the ride. I'm Mitchell Wilson. Let's get into it. Today we have Kip O'Donnell, Director of Start, which is about connecting talent. He's a father, a founder, and over 20 years experience in strategic recruitment and leadership roles all the way across the world in likes of London, the US, and now New Zealand. We're talking about recruitment today. Kip, let's talk small business.
How are you, Mitchell?
Bloody good. Yourself?
I'm really well, really well.
Awesome. Now, today I really want to talk about recruitment, but before we get into this, really want to know a little bit about yourself. So, you're sitting here, you own your company Start, but where did it all start? Take me back through your career. How did we get here?
Yeah, cool. Well, look, I'll go right back to the start. So I grew up in Geraldine, Big Smoke. Studied at University of Otago and then ended up in London. And that's where I started in my recruitment career. I think many Kiwis done similar things. Arrived in London and thought, what's now? What's next? And I was always pretty good with people and good at networking and meeting people. So recruitment sort of found me. Worked in London for about 5 or 6 years in recruitment, and then decided to meander my way home and enjoy Michael Page, who was a global recruitment business in Auckland. So,
awesome!
Spent 6-7 years with Michael Page in Auckland. So they were relatively new to the New Zealand market when I joined them, and it was a big part of, I guess, building that business in New Zealand.
So, what kind of size was the company in terms of maybe number of people, or what was it doing when you first started versus?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting time, which I arrived just sort of middle of start of the GFC, and not an ideal time to be getting into recruitment, really. But in hindsight, it was actually a great time to be getting in. I met the guy who hired me, Pete McCauley, great man, and learnt a lot from him. So Michael Page had been going about a year in New Zealand, a large global recruiter, but was new to the ground in New Zealand. So worked with him on really getting out there and sort of developing a brand and developing Michael Page in New Zealand in a time when not much recruitment was going on and everyone was watching.
It was the opposite way, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had to knock on a few doors and you learnt the hard way. But it was actually in hindsight great grounding, and sort of 4 or 5 of us started around the same time or in that year and developed, worked our way through the business, and towards the end of my time there we're all leading divisions and leading teams. So again, great grounding, and met some really good people at the start of that business who end up being great mates and still are in business context to this day. So I grew up in the South, as I mentioned, and was always kind of keen to get back to the South Island. My wife is a Wellingtonian, so I was always keen to get back, but I couldn't quite sell Geraldine to her.
Fair enough.
So Nelson was the far south as I could get her to sign off, to be up front with you. So
good choice, though.
Ended up moving down here and actually moved out of recruitment, moved into working at NZME, so radio and print media. So worked for NZME for 5.5, 6 years, just under 6 years here in Nelson. So managing the wider region, managed a team in Nelson, a team in Blenheim, and a team in West Coast. So advertising was new to me then. So walked into a sector I guess I didn't know much around, and straight into managing a team of about 12. So, I learned a lot in that role around learning on your feet whilst trying to manage and execute a team plan and a strategy. So it's, again, you look back on it and think tough at the time, but really took some lessons and took some learnings away from that, which really helped you in the rest of your career.
Was there much? I'm just trying to think about the differences between the industries. I mean, advertising versus recruiting. It doesn't. Is there any crossover there, or what?
Well, look, I think recruitment is a very broad sector. It's all about people, and you are ultimately working with people as your product or your service, for lack of a better term. But I think if you get the right people in any role, advertising included, who can build relationships and build networks, then that's going to work in advertising as much as it does in recruitment. So there was the people skills and the questioning and the ability to understand what people do and where they fit into a business. And that you learn that in recruitment. You learn a lot around what people actually do and where they fit in. And I think some of those things you can take across to any sector. So it was really different. Advertising took a wee while to get your head around sort of the products and services and the difference. But I think some of those people skills and the ability to understand what people do and how to maximize what they do that definitely helped. But yeah, look, that first year, there's a couple of questions myself lying in bed at night, like, how are we going to get through this? What am I going to do? But you do, and I think again, it sort of tools you up for the rest of your career.
Now you hopped into or New Zealand in the GFC, where it was fairly tough, and I'm just going to presume towards the end of your career in NZME, there were some tough times as well. Because does that even exist anymore? I seen the other day that, because I know they owned Grab One, and that went under the other day, which is like Groupon in the US. Where is NZME? Catch me up, because so many changes happened.
They're still a major player. So they own the New Zealand Herald, they own News Talk ZB, a lot of the radio brands. Still very much a big player. They did sell Grab One probably 4 or 5 years ago, before Grab One folded.
Right.
But no, very much a beast. Still doing some really good things. But I guess they've really restructured and changed. I think when I was managing the business here in the region, there was probably 12, 13 people across the business. There's now probably 3 or 4.
Yeah, big change.
They own One Roof as well, so really strong in the real estate channel. But no, still a big player in the New Zealand market, but you're definitely a smaller presence in the regions. And I think the whole advertising market globally is changing around traditional media and mainstream media, and advertising dollars being kind of stretched everywhere. So those traditional media players have had to evolve and definitely change to what they were sort of 10, 15 years ago.
Okay. NZME, where to from there?
So then, look, I think Mitch was 41, 42, well, 41, and thought, I'm not getting any older. There was always a desire to see, what it would be like to run your own business and think about what you'd bring to your own business and I guess to a wider market. And look, I saw an opportunity here, being in the region for sort of 5 or 6 years there, that there was an opportunity to go out and form my own recruitment business. So some sleepless nights and some decision making with my wife and some friends and family. Thought, let's do it. So resigned from NZME and then started Start. So set Start up in October 21, coming out of the GFC, 3 young kids. And again, it was pretty tricky at the start to get your head around. That first day is like, now sort of, what do I do? And I think the hardest thing for me was probably, it's all exciting and it's great and you're excited about it and you're passionate about it and you've got your pitch lined up and how you're going to position yourself, but no one knows who you are and no one knows what you offer, and no one really, still a lot of people, especially in the region, sometimes don't actually know what a recruitment person does. So a lot of introduction meetings, talking about what I could offer, talking about what I do, and then trying to position, why me as opposed to some other people who are doing it yourself. So again, that first 6 to 12 months was challenging, but exciting. And it's different, I think, when you work for yourself.
It's a really big call, especially yourself, coming from a corporation, I presume, decent salary there, to go from here to ground zero. Let's do it. I mean, especially with a family as well. That takes courage, really.
Yeah. Looking back, it does. And a few people said to me, you're walking away from a pretty good gig. And I'd always worked for large brands. That's something I'd always worked for. Large brands who are established, who had multiple businesses in different regions. So to go for working for yourself was a real change. I had some really good friends who'd done similar things, who were an awesome support. A good mate of mine, Richard Stenhouse, is very much a leader in the recruitment game here in the sports sector in New Zealand at the moment. Was fantastic, and still spend a lot of time with him. But it was a big risk to take, and just that things you take for granted sometimes. I think 2 months in, the printer ran out of ink, and I was like, well,
who's going to change
that? How do I change that? Where do I get ink? What do I do? All those things you kind of take for granted with a larger business. That it's sometimes not the big stuff that sinks a ship; it's the little stuff. So I definitely learned a lot. I learned what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And, a lot of administrative tasks which took you a long time, and you're like, is my time being best served here? And understanding systems and processes and how to set that up, and what's actually going to work for you and what's not. And look, you make a few mistakes and you learn as you go. But I think just going in with an open mind and a will to do it, that definitely helps.
Nice one. Hey, well, let's track back a couple of seconds. You mentioned before about, hey, you had to explain to people sort of what you do. So one of the reasons why I got you on this podcast here today is I've been talking to a number of smaller businesses lately, and they said, oh, look, we just need people. We need people. But they didn't know where to start. And I said, why don't you start with a recruitment agency? And they said, a what? So I think you hit on it before. Maybe in the larger corporate firms, this is just run of the mill stuff. But when it comes to some SMEs, some just, I've realized, may not know that services like yours exist. So can you give it a rundown? Is it exactly what recruitment services, what your business does, and how it works?
Yeah, sure. And look, I think you're right. Yeah, there's still a lot of people who don't know what they do and sometimes don't know actually that they exist. I think it's changing. I think the going global for a minute, the European global markets recruitment in London has been the way to do it for 20, 30 years. It's very similar in Australia, probably a little behind that, and then New Zealand's behind again. And I think the larger regions are probably more familiar with the recruitment process than some of than the regions throughout New Zealand, but it's definitely growing and changing. So what I do really, Mitchell, is I help businesses find people. So generally, I'll come to a business, explain what I do. They'll have a need for a certain type of person. So I'll spend a bit of time with them, understanding what they are about, what they do, and then ultimately what they need. So really, I think trying to make a hiring process simpler for them and to make sure that they have got the right person for a role. I think it's large corporates. It's always there's more churn. There's more people in and out of a large business. A smaller business is very much dependent on their people, and getting the wrong person or getting the right person can have a huge effect on a smaller business, probably in a greater proportion than a large business. So getting it right, getting the right person, getting the right fit, that's really what I do, and try and maximize the chance of when a business does go to market that they get the right person for what they need.
Now, you said something to me the other day that really, really stuck up here, in the fact that, because I said, why not just look on Seek or whatever the case is, or put an ad up. And you told me that, hey, look, that's all well and fair, but a lot of the times, the best people aren't actually looking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I've done it myself, hiring people. You sometimes do put an ad up on Seek and you'll get an absolute gun, and that's a fantastic thing, and it helps. It moves quickly. You get the right person, but often that's not the case, and often the person, as I said to you, who is potentially on Seek all day or Trade Me or a job board, who's looking for a role, is not necessarily the best talent that you want in the market. I always find the good people, the people you really want, that top 5-10%, are probably head down making budget, or head down being busy, or head down working away on the strategy or whatever they're doing. But they're not necessarily looking on Seek and Trade Me because they are being paid well by their employer to stay with that business. So often what I do is a bit more of a proactive approach. So talking to a wide range of people, saying, do you know anyone in this sector who's worth a conversation? Working on LinkedIn, working through my networks to understand who is the active talent in that market, and understanding who they are, and then understanding if an opportunity popped up, would they be interested in a call. So a lot of what I do is behind the scenes. It's talking to people probably before a role comes up sometimes, and saying, hey, look, this is what I do, this is Start, this is what we can offer, this is me, this is Kip, this is my background. If an opportunity popped up that might be relevant to you, would you be interested in a confidential conversation sometimes? And look, sometimes people won't be, but the majority of good people will always say, look, I'm happy where I am now, but if an opportunity popped up that looked like X, Y, and Z, I might be interested in a conversation. Those people aren't looking on Seek and Trade Me every day. They are head down, as I said before, so you have to have a proactive approach. So what I always say is, look, get your ad on Seek, get your ad on Trade Me, have a proactive approach, but make sure you're doing that all at one time. So when you do go to market, you're definitely maximizing the chance to get that right person. Because as I said before, if you get it wrong, it's tough. It can be tough, and someone good can really change your business and move things forward.
So you really do have like a little black book. Is that what I'm hearing? All those names and numbers.
It's now digital, Mitchell, but yeah, I do. And again, you don't get it right every time, and still it's the hardest thing sometimes, because you are matching people, and people have personalities, and people have moods, and people have different ways of doing things. And sometimes I've been doing this a long time now. You think a match is perfect on paper, they think it's perfect on paper, and it sometimes doesn't work. So you've always got to be eyes wide open, and you've got to communicate, and you've got to understand that even sometimes when people like each other, it sometimes doesn't quite work. So it's not an exact science. And I always say to my clients, we will potentially make some mistakes here. Bringing me in it tries to minimize those mistakes as much as we can and make sure that the candidate can talk to me about what some of their challenges or reservations may be that they can't necessarily talk to a potential client about in an interview process. So I can kind of soften the blow and understand and get information to a client or information to a candidate so they can best make a decision more so than if they go direct. And I think one thing which I'll say is, when people, if you apply for a role on Seek, you see a job ad, you have potentially a screening call for might be 15 minutes for someone. You go and meet that person, you spend 45 minutes to an hour tops sometimes with them, and then you might be called back in for a second interview for another 45. So you're really only sometimes spending 2.5 hours speaking about what this role might be or what the person can bring to that role. That's not a lot of time considering you're going to be there for the next foreseeable, and you really need to dig in. So it's sometimes a really hard thing to pitch your role and pitch your business and what you're trying to achieve, and for them to pitch what they can bring to that role in that short amount of time. And then again, bring someone like myself in, I can often be the conduit between the candidate and the client to get a bit more information and understanding of what people bring to the role.
So where does your role start and finish? Like, are you doing interview? Like, where does it start, and how far do you take the candidates through?
Well, look, as I said, generally I will have met the person prior to them going in. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes I'll go out and proactively search and find people for that role and then interview. So I'll spend some time. I'll spend time on the phone with them. I'll interview them a couple of times. I'll have a coffee with them, get a feel for what they're about. And again, that really good candidate will tell you what they need and tell you what they're looking for. It won't just be around salary. It'll be around, I need a business that's this type of person or this type of growth strategy, or they want to be aspirational, or they've got good human beings at the helm. So and your screening process will kind of line that up beforehand. I'll facilitate interviews, so I'll organise interviews for them. I'll generally organise shortlists, so you might have 4 or 5 candidates for one role. I'll organise the interviews for that process. I'll organise second interviews, and then I'll organise and manage the offer process. And I think that sometimes can be the toughest bits for a lot of people, especially sometimes clients who are not used to that process. Talking money is quite awkward for a lot of people, and it's not something that we do generally in society. We shy away from conversations around money and, I guess, remuneration. So having that conversation prior to both the candidate and the client enables you to have that process go smoothly towards the end. So I'll manage that offer process. I'll manage any questions or any back and forth they have around salary or any issues in a clause in a contract, and then I'll manage the signing of that contract and whatever comes in the back of that. Then I'll effectively hand over that client and the client and the candidate to make that process work themselves. But I'll always keep in touch with the clients and the candidates on the back of that. And I think you'll know this yourself, Mitchell. When you work for yourself, it's a bit different than working for a corporate. You're not just dumping and moving away, but you are involved in them throughout the process and talking to the client, talking to the candidate, how they feel about it, how it's all going, any concerns, and managing that through the next year or so. We do have guarantee periods and things that varies from candidate and client to what that looks like. But my experience, you have those conversations up front for a start, and generally it runs really smoothly.
One of those questions you brought up is about money. And I guess sometimes, again, for your SME businesses, the hiring isn't happening every week or, every month. And so you can be a little bit far away from potentially what the going market rate is for particular positions. So I presume just you've got a handle on where that is, where is the market, especially in days of inflation. What's it looking like out there right now? How would you describe it? And do you just have your finger on the pulse of these things? How's that all work?
Yeah, look, it's a tough part of the role. You've got your finger on the pulse, but that doesn't mean something. That doesn't mean a lot to some clients who will say, look, this is what I've got and this is what I can pay and that's what it is. And sometimes for various reasons, they won't be able to meet the market. So that changes the way you recruit and changes what you need to look for and type of candidate you have to look for. And my role is advisory as well. And I have to be upfront sometimes, and I do this quite often, saying to a client, look, you're not paying enough for what you're looking for. I think you want X, Y, Z, but you're not paying the money to get X, Y, Z. You're getting X and Y, and you haven't got the remuneration to bring those candidates across. So look, sometimes those conversations are tricky and no one wants to pay what they don't have to, but the reality is sometimes you've got to meet the market if you want that talent. there is always the Nelson sunshine wages piece. Everyone says the remuneration down here is probably not what it should be, and sometimes that's the case. I think it moved forward with COVID. Post-COVID, there was a real shortage in talent and people were crying out. And I think that did move the dial forward in terms of salaries and what people were getting paid. But again, Mitchell, it varies from business to business, from sector to sector. There is no sometimes exact science around it. There is a number that kind of the market has, but there can always be some variance either side of that for what businesses have the ability to do.
And curious to know, like, obviously it's not about money, and that may not be the main driver. What about the lifestyle factor in terms of, some people nowadays, talking about 4-day weeks or flexibility in their role that seems to be good. How much of it that is coming through in terms of what people are looking for nowadays?
Well, I'm showing my age here. I was talking to a mate the other day. We started recruiting together in London, actually. We were talking about that, and he's still recruiting in London. And we were talking. You never used to get asked about that. It was about salary, it was about benefits, and what the team was like. Now, sometimes it's one of the first questions asked. What are the flexibility? Can I work from home? What are my restrictions or constraints around that? And look, it's a tricky one. Again, it comes down to what I said before. Every client's got a different policy on it. Some are, look, if you're a good operator and it suits the role, then you can work from home a couple of days a week. Others are a flat no. And I think those flat no's are probably, there's been a bit of a swing back in the last wee while. We want people in the office more than we did 2 years ago. That's definitely been a trend. So again, that's my job to communicate that and go out and look for people who don't necessarily want to work from home or are okay in the office. But it comes down to, I guess, what the person paying, how much flexibility they want to have. But definitely more than it used to be, for sure.
Cool. Hey, now I only learnt this recently again from you. In terms of recruitment, you said it like it's a wide sector, and so there are different specialists that recruit for different types of jobs. Is that right? Can you kind of break that down so everyone's got an understanding of who they should be looking for who they're hiring?
Yeah, sure. Yep. So look, there's generally what I do is mostly white collar roles, for lack of a better term. So I do a lot of work, sales, marketing, finance, accountancy, operations roles. Generally roles that are required office based or are operational based. There's labour hire, and there's a lot of labour hire providers in the wider region here. So they will generally be your trades and labour, your unskilled labour, your factory workers, that type of thing. And that's a really competitive market. A lot of those will work contract, so they'll pay people, take them on as contractors and pay them by the hour. So it's generally labour hire and kind of white collar recruitment. And generally what Start does is more in that white collar piece. I have a lot of friends and networks and colleagues who I partner with, a couple of those guys in the labour hire market as well. And sometimes we'll share clients and share candidates where we see fit. But there's no exact science when you're picking someone to work with recruitment wise. I think two things you got to look for is, are they trustworthy? Are they going to do what they say they're going to do, and do they have the networks and contacts to help you? I was thinking about how we used to do it back in the day, for lack of a better term. It was very much networks, contacts, good people. We still do that, and that is still prominent for I guess the main way we do it. But now you've got technology to help you as well, and there's a lot of AI products and AI technologies that are coming in to help you create I guess lists and understand the wider market who's here from a technology, and combining that with networking to find the best people.
So talking about that, I would say probably a lot has changed since COVID in terms of, hey, we're doing this interview right now, online. We don't need to be
in the world, isn't it?
Yeah. And so for you've already mentioned that you're in the Nelson region of New Zealand, but do you work further afield?
Yeah, I do. And again, when I started, a lot of my networks and contacts were in Auckland. So probably 50%, 40% of what I do is outside of the region. So a lot of it is in Auckland or throughout the South Island.
Yeah.
So again, you can be remote. The expectation, I think the norms have changed around recruiting and meeting people remotely than you used to do years ago. Generally, if I'm recruiting with a client outside of based, I'll try and get up there and meet them and get a feel for them. But there's a lot of it is done remotely, and I think the expectation around candidates is different as well. That remote Zoom video calling is sufficient these days. Obviously, face to face is always better, but there's an expectation and a normalization, I think, of video more so than there was 5 years ago.
You just need a webcam when you're face to face.
What's that? Sorry.
You just need to wear pants when you're face to
Yeah,
face,
totally.
as
Yeah,
opposed
and I
to
look at
who knows
and
what I'm wearing right now. Yeah, yeah.
I won't ask questions, mate. But you, yeah, you do. You sometimes do get a wee bit complacent, and yeah, it's just business upstairs, party downstairs.
Hey, now we'll step back just for a little second. We'll talk about Start, your business, and you mentioned before about, I guess, one man band. Okay, uh, how has it been in terms of that big change from going corporate to here? You mentioned, hey, there's all these sort of admin tasks and all the rest, but what are the other challenges that you found?
Look, I think I've always been a social person. I've always worked in sales-based teams, and I've always spent probably more time than you should sometimes laughing and talking to your colleagues. And I think that's the one thing I've probably missed more so than ever. And working as a team, when you've worked together as a team, you've gone through some adversity, you've gone through some tough times, and you come out the other end. There's no better feeling when you get it right as a team. So moving away from that took me a wee while to get my head round. How I've done it is Start, whilst I work by myself and still am working by myself, I partner with a lot of other agencies. So I've got Rada Recruitment and Global Elite Sports who I work with on a regular basis around, recruitment projects, opportunities, sharing candidates, sharing clients. Those guys are fantastic. And there's other colleagues and clients that I work with as well on a regular basis to share ideas, to share, trends, to understand the market. And so whilst you're working together I guess by yourself day to day, you've got a lot of partners and people in similar situations for yourself. And look, I was really close to pulling trigger and adding to my team a year or so ago there, Mitchell. But obviously, a few situations changed my end, which I haven't done that as yet. But look, that's the plan as we sort of move forward and get back on track.
Okay, working. I mean, in your role, you're pretty much remote because you need to be on the road, seeing people, all that kind of stuff. Working in an office versus home, how's that all work in your life?
Yeah, look, I worked from home for I set up a home office for the first year, and it was good. But I missed the people, so I moved into a shared office with an insurance brokers, and they're all good people, and enjoyed that social aspect of people around you, just more connectivity and come sometimes feeding off those guys and their energy around that, which was awesome. So I did that for a couple of years and had some real success in that and loved it. Moved home about a year ago, back into my home office, and look, it's good. Controlling your eating patterns is probably the hardest thing for me.
Lock on the fridge.
There needs to be a padlock on the pantry because I start to move. You realise that you're a couple of biscuits deep by 9:30, and then lunch is at 10, and so the infrastructure falls out. So once you get your head around that, there's pros and cons either way. But I'm a social creature, Mitchell. I enjoy people, so I am at home at the moment, but I will move back into an office early in the new year.
Now, this is a big one, and you're in your 40s, Kip. Okay?
45.
Okay, there we go. Which we're going to say is just young.
Prime.
However, I do know that you had a little bit of a health scare. Love to hear about it. And the reason why we want to hear about it is obviously being, in business as well, is it's got its effects on that. So some people might experience it. So yeah, give us a story. Tell us what happened. And then we'll kind of find out that business outlook and what they did.
Yeah, sure. So what are we? Middle of November. So it was about middle of October last year, 2024. I went to get a mole checked, actually, and I was in there getting a mole checked, and the doctor pretty much told me I was a hypochondriac about my mole. Nothing wrong with
Good
it.
on you for actually doing that, though. Most guys probably should be right.
Turned out to be a good call. So listened to my heart and picked up some kind of slosh at the end of my heartbeat, which I wasn't aware of. So back and forward, did a couple of tests and found out that I had regurgitation on my mitral valve in my heart. So I had a crook heart. So my valve wasn't closing properly. So blood was going back and forward from my lungs into my heart. And it wasn't functioning well. So it was unbeknown to me. I was asymptomatic, really. I had a couple of times I was out walking up a hill and sort of stopped, but I just thought that was being 44 and the dream was over.
But you're a fairly fit person, aren't you?
Yeah, I always keep myself pretty
You're
fit.
active. Yeah.
So I didn't really think about that much, but when they did say that, I was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. So I was kind of thinking it might be some medication or whatever, but no, it turned out it was heart surgery. So I had open heart surgery on end of February this year. So up to Auckland, so a few days in ICU, 10 days in hospital, and they cut you straight down the sternum and do a few things in there. So
You're in the zipper club. You got that awesome.
I've got the full zipper.
Yeah.
The full zipper down here. So look, that was it was tough to go through, tough at the time, and just that vulnerability. I haven't really felt that vulnerable in your life, and relying on others. My wife was fantastic, huge support. My kids were great, and my wider family and friends. But you kind of realise that you tick along, you make all these plans, things can change pretty quickly. And look, I was lucky; it was something that was fixable, and there's not too many long-term issues around it. There's other people out there with issues they can't fix. So you got to be grateful for that. But I did learn a lot at Mitchell around your business and working for yourself. There wasn't ACCs. There's no cover really, and you kind of, whilst you're kind of working through it, I was all over the show there for 3 or 4 months afterwards, and I probably didn't appreciate it till.
How long from when you got diagnosed to when you had surgery?
Well, I got it all kind of the last meeting with the cardiologist when they made the call was back into start of December, so 2.5 months after that I went in for surgery.
Because that would have had a little bit of scary sort of thoughts going through your head.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of always, it's just happening until it happens, until you get a couple of months out and you're like, this is.
Does that mean your focus was away from work during that time as well, or?
Yeah, probably, yeah. And look, the market had been relatively challenging in the lead-in. 2024, 2025 have been relatively tough from a recruitment perspective. The market hasn't been dead, but it's definitely been quieter. So I didn't have a pile of work on, and I kind of eased back as I was going into that, because working for yourself, it's harder to manage that portfolio of work. But post coming out of the operation, it took me a wee bit longer probably than anticipated to get back into a working mindset, and just that you're tired, you're a wee bit off, and it's hard to sometimes be at your best and trying to drive things when you're not fully there. So
how long did you need to sort of take off after something like that, which is major heart surgery?
Well, I actually had a deal that I was going through, and I was back into I picked up the tools a couple of weeks afterwards. And in hindsight, I wasn't in the right space to be doing that. So look, it took me 3 or 4 months to sort of get back into a rhythm, and then to sort of drive it forward from then. But the last few months definitely back on track, which is good. But I think you realise it makes you think about what you want to achieve, not just from a work perspective, but life and kids and family and all that kind of stuff. And again, you've probably gone through your life, you're bulletproof, nothing's ever happened to you. I've been pretty blessed with everything I've done, and then you have a hiccup like this, and it just gets you thinking about, you're at an age and stage now that, what do you actually want to achieve? What do you want to be doing? What's important? You can strive for as much money as you want, but sometimes you got to look back and say, your kids and your family and life's important. So I think that was probably the thing I'll take out of it. Definitely made you reassess your life choices and where you want to be and what you want to be doing.
So I guess I need to ask you right now, are you doing what you want to be doing?
Yeah, look, I enjoy working for myself. I've enjoyed what I've done. Will I make some changes around the team and working with teams and working in a team? I think that's probably something that I've realised I'm probably missing a little bit more than I thought I would. So look, I don't know. It's going well for now. We're working back in. The market is starting to move, and next year I think will be really good. But yeah, it definitely makes you think, Mitchell. And it's never an exact science, right? Thinking about your future and what you want to do, and I think that's an ever evolving issue.
And you're allowed to change your mind as well. So many people get stuck in to go, hey, you said that, but you're allowed to change your mind, guys.
Good point. Sometimes everyone forgets that, including me. And just because you advise on people's careers and what you do, sometimes you're your own worst enemy around that kind of thing as well. So you're right. You are allowed to change your mind. But look, I think this year is all just about getting through this year and marching forward for me. And then next year, we'll make some decisions around what it looks like. But ultimately, you've done the hard work. You've built a brand. You've got some success. It's definitely kind of set up now to move it forward.
Because from the downside of things, of I guess being in business for yourself, depending on what level, it may be at a level where it runs itself. And in that case, it's like brilliant, great. You can have that time off. But if you're at a stage in business where you're still working in the business, in some thoughts, I've seen people that go, man, I wish I was back in corporate, because, hey, time off, they'll probably pay you, get well soon, get back when you're ready, and there's that kind of less worry and hassle. So I guess, it's a way up. So
right, and there's pros and cons either way. You you give away, like you're right. If I was working for a corporate business here, you'd be paid for that. All those kind of things matter, but the flexibility and the ability to work with people you want to work with, like-minded people, and I think that's a trade-off. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's what suits the person, but there's definitely some pros and cons to both options for sure.
Okay. Righto. So we are November 2025. Okay. Coming up to 2026. We're talking about New Zealand. You're seeing probably things that some others may not, in terms of what businesses are thinking about recruiting, what it's looking like maybe in the near future in 2026. What's your take on the outlook of the market?
Look, I get asked this quite often, and I think there is some variance around there in what people think. I think, I start of the year was a little bit obviously different for me, but there was talk that back into 25 was really things were going to really start moving. I think that's probably been being pushed six or so months out. I think there are some green shoots more so this year than there are last year. I think there's still some pockets of success, but there's some real issues and challenges around perception and what's coming. A lot of employment is around confidence. So what you can see in the next 6 to 12 months, do you have the pipeline, the networks, and can you see what's coming? And if you can, then you're able to hire and put people in place around that. If you can't see what's coming, you're unsure, people won't hire, or they'll be less likely to do so. So I think there's definitely been some green shoots in the last couple of months. I'm picking back end, from July sort of onwards in 2026, we'll see some real movement in the recruitment market, maybe a little bit prior to that, but people all still are on that conservative side. But look, we're definitely in a better position than we were 6 months ago, Mitchell. Confidence is moving forward, but that confidence is slow to come, and probably slower than it was 5-6 years ago when we went through similar things. So I think, again, it varies on people's perception. It's the old glass half full, glass half empty people, and you're not going to change that. But generally, I think that the consensus is this time next year will be better than it is now.
Okay, so if someone's out there listening to this and they're kind of thinking, hey, maybe I should be thinking about recruiting, what would your advice be to them?
Look, I pick up the phone and have a chat to a couple of people. Have a chat to a couple of recruiters. I think there's a lot of recruitment consultants and recruitment businesses out there. And same in any sector. There'll be people who are perfect for you. There'll be people who won't be right for you. There'll be good operators. There'll be poor operators. Find someone who you know, or find someone you gel with, and find someone who is going to be upfront with you and tell you the good and the bad. Recruitment is a really simple process. You've got a job, you find a candidate, they place that candidate, they work in your job. It's really simple in terms of how it is, but there's so many different things along each of those stages which can go wrong or can work out in a detrimental way. So you need to have confidence in the person helping you do that they've got experience around that, and they will tell you the good and the bad. Because very rarely a recruitment process runs from start to finish without something slightly going wrong. And it's the ability for that person to walk you through that and be upfront with you around that to enable it to work successfully. But it is, a lot of my clients who, down here, especially in the regions, who've worked with me for the first time are the first time they've recruited, and look, they've become really good clients and loyal clients, because it does enable them to focus on other things. It does enable them to step away from some of that stuff that is a little bit tough for them around people and remuneration and those types of things, and enables them to get on with what they need to grow a business. So find the right person and just be really upfront with them around what you're looking for.
Because realistically, in my experience, is an A player is worth 2 to 3 B or C players. 100%. Like, they can make a massive difference to a SME.
Yeah, totally. And as I said before, every business wants the best person. Not everyone can get the best person, but the best person for one business will be different to what it is for another. So actually understanding and trying to know what you need can sometimes be the hardest thing. And I often go to a lot of briefs, and clients will say to me, "Look, Kip, this is what we're after. This is what we need." And actually digging in and saying, is that what you need? Is it a business development manager? Is it a sales manager? Is it an operations manager? Understanding with what actually someone needs before they go to market is sometimes the crucial bit that sometimes people forget. Just because a salesperson leaves doesn't mean you need to replace them with the exact same person. understanding what they need is really important, and something that I think sometimes is missed when people go to market.
Cool. Okay, one last question on a different note. You're a business owner, but you've been through some kind of scary moment with the heart surgery there. Today, how do you define success?
It's a good question. I think success means, it's a cliche question, but it means different things to different people. For me, it's about having good people around you, good people who respect and trust you. And that circle may be larger and smaller for a lot of people, but success for me is having a network of people who are around you, who want to be around you and who trust you and you trust them. And I think that's ultimately probably what's changed a little bit for me. I've always been put value on good, loyal friends, and I'll always do that. But actually now, thinking long term, it's about your family, it's about your friends, it's about success and what that means to you. But look, I want to make Start a success, and it has been going well, and I want to make money to enable to set up my family. But also, on the contrary to that, it's got to be done with your family and the people around you. It's an ever-evolving thing, Mitchell, and going through something like that probably changes a little bit.
Hey, so how do people get in contact with you?
Well, I'm based in Nelson, but recruit nationally. So startrecruit.co.nz is my website. You can get in touch with me via that. But look, we're always open to speaking to people. New clients are obviously what we're about, and ongoing success. And I think for me, it's about that personal connection and personal touch. You'll be working with me. You'll be working with me on a direct basis, and I'm always keen to have a conversation if there's an interest.
Awesome. Hey, well, you talked about being around the right people. So it's my pleasure to be around you today and hear your story and learn so much from you. Look, this has been Let's Talk Small Business with Kip O'Donnell. Thanks so much. Cheers for coming.
Thanks, Mitchell. All the best.
Let's Talk Small Business. I appreciate you tuning in. If you got value, hit subscribe, like, or drop a comment. It spreads the word and might just help another legend get their breakthrough.